We live, and in His name we die. Here and there, our souls prostrate to their Creator with humbleness and piety. And creatures do dhikr all the time, here and there. La 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 la, la 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 la.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, dear viewers, joining us on our live program Here and There, our Ramadan special for 2017. Dear viewers, I'd like to welcome you on the 26th night of Ramadan, a blessed night. And inshallah ta'ala, we have lots to talk about today. As you are aware, you've been following us, we have been talking about so many different subjects. Also, we've been going to various countries, looking at Muslims in Indonesia, Muslims in France, Muslims in the States. But today, inshallah, we're going to cross over the British Isles and go into the UK and have a look at Muslims inside of the UK. But before we do that, dear viewers, I would like to touch on a few things. First and foremost is the fact that Islam, subhanAllah, is the fastest growing religion in the world. It reached as far east as China and as far east as Spain, or that into the UK, and yet it is still growing. People are welcoming and embracing Islam at a faster rate than ever. Not just that, but very interesting statistic that in Europe, in UK to be specific, that the most amount of people that are embracing Islam are young British women. Not just that, but the age range. It's the youngsters that are accepting Islam. Don't you find it amazing how people are turning back to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When we look into the skies and we look into the seas, we look into ourselves, that Allah has given us our eyesight, our hearing, our feeling, that one submits to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One acknowledges that there is a creator and that we have a purpose in this life. Allah tells us in the Holy Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have created jinn and mankind for a purpose, a divine purpose, and that is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So dear viewers, we're going to be looking at Islam, the fastest growing religion in the world. We're also going to be looking at Muslims inside of the UK, and we have a very special guest with us in the studio, and he's going to be talking about his journey to Islam, and then also talk about Muslims and how they spend Ramadan in the UK. So don't forget, our phone lines are open. You can join us with your questions, your queries, your comments via phone. And also you can join us on Skype as well, which is Huda_TV. So please do join us, give us your questions, and make the program interactive as well. Let us go around the table and see who we have in the studio. If I can turn to my right, my co-worker, my brother Omar. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the warm introduction, like always. And we're very happy that we're talking about a new country, inshallah. We are looking forward to know the Islamic organizations, if there are any, and inshallah in the UK, how are Muslims participating with the community and so on and so forth. And I know that you didn't blow one of the information about the guest, but maybe we can leave it to Brother Ali to say it. So, and so before this, we introduce Brother Ali to the show. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Omar, and thank you very much, Brother Junaid.
Thank you.
And welcome, viewer, for joining us tonight in our discussion about Islam in the UK. We look forward to this information that's going to be shared with us by a British Muslim who's here with us. Let's go ahead and introduce him for tonight's show. And please join us. We've been missing the phone calls over the past few days, and we appreciate you watching, being a part of us, and look forward to your participation. Tonight we're joined by Nathan Musa. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nathan. Welcome to the...
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm really honored to be here today, and I know you guys want to hear about the story and British Islam, and hopefully I can do an adequate job in informing the viewers as well.
We look forward to, I'm sure it'll be interesting discussion. We look forward to hearing about, there are lots of interesting things that we've been seeing in recent years coming out of the UK, politically, archaeologically, with the discovery of the 7th century Quran at the university, that confirms that the Qurans that we're using right now are consistent with the one revealed 14 centuries ago.
Wow.
That we have a number of things that are happening we look forward to. Let's start, though, Brother Nathan, with your walk to embracing Islam. Did you grow up as a Muslim?
No. So I actually was brought up as a Christian. I was practicing Christian as well, till around, I would say, university. But a couple of years before that, I went to college. So in England, the education system kind of goes from secondary school from 13 to 16. From 16 to 18, you go to college, and then from 18 to about 21, 22, you're at university. So when I kind of left secondary school at 16, I left almost all my friends, my kind of like my social structure, my just kind of like my routine, and I kind of uplifted myself into a new challenge. With this new challenge in college, I studied subjects that I wanted to study: philosophy, history. I studied music technology, and I studied sociology as well. These kind of were very exciting to me, and with that brought a kind of interest in understanding other people's and other ways of life. So that's kind of like one segment to that's kind of like the beginning step, especially philosophy. Philosophy, I remember now, it challenged my core beliefs in Christianity, and it posed questions that I couldn't answer. For instance, how in the Christian sense, it challenged the idea of there being a kind of all-loving God. Now, that concept is in Islam, but I soon learnt that in Islam there's 99 names of God. There's 99 attributes of God. I found that far more encompassing at 17, because the following stage, what happened was that I was 16 when I joined college. At 17, I met a very close friend, and she was Muslim, and we started to have dialogue and conversation. She was Turkish Muslim.
So sorry, Nathan, for continuing, so your first interaction with Islam was when you hit 17?
I wouldn't say my first interaction. I actually went to a Christian school in East London in a place called Tower Hamlets, which is, as you know, Ustad, is very populated by a lot of Muslims. But our interaction, even though I lived next door, was very, I can admit now, was very racist and stereotypical of Muslims. It wasn't. We had you know, stereotypes, and because of those stereotypes and because of my age, I wasn't prepared to discuss. Or if we were discussing, it would be more like, okay, that's your religion, I have my religion. And it was just that kind of interaction for a certain...
So you were exposed to the humanities. You were a student of humanities, studying history and philosophy and so on and so forth. That necessarily obliges you. You're responsible for knowing different world views, different ways of seeing the world, different cultural values, so on and so forth. But still, you're saying it was within a context that was very narrow-minded?
Yes, of course. Like, I think, like, you know, racial... and we'll probably hope, well, I think we'll come to this later on about Islamophobia in Britain. You know, it is something that is very deep-rooted within the structures and the peoples. You know, we do have a very Arabized and kind of Asianized sense of what Islam is. Like, you know, there was an African Muslim in my secondary school. I didn't even know he was Muslim. Like, we don't even really have the concept that Islam was in Africa for... just generally, like, we just don't have that concept. So coming to college and meeting, you know, my Turkish friend, and then meeting and hearing her story and just, you know, being brought into not just the theological aspects of the religion, but the political, the social, and that kind of helped me.
Okay. So the first question that you were referring to, Brother Musa, that was the problem of evil. Is this right? Yeah,
I mean, that was one thing I look back now as I remember being a core component of you know, how Islam answered that, and I found that.
So what's the difference between, like, the Christian view and the Muslim view when it comes to the problem of evil?
I mean, I don't, you know, want to do a disservice to the Christian religion, because I'm sure there's far, you know, more educated people than me to talk about it. But for me, I can only talk about my experience. I felt like, you know, the things I studied in philosophy, as well as my religious background, there wasn't an adequate response, for instance, in if children die, right, by horrific events, whether that's a terrorist act or whether that's kind of like, even like if it's like something like earthquakes and more things to do with natural things, because we would admit that these natural things are created by God, earthquakes, tsunamis, things like this. So how do we respond to the act? Well, if God is all loving, how come children dies by these things, by earthquakes and so forth and so forth? And I remember it was at university. I went to a lecture, just like a talk, an Islamic talk. And I remember someone, the speaker, mentioned that in Islam, when a child dies, they automatically go to heaven. And that was just, another point in my journey, which I thought, this answers my question here. Because when it's adults, how we die, that's just by the will of God, right? Like, and we're supposed to be good people and try and stop sinning, and that's just the struggle of life. But when it's children, there's something I think universal. When we see children suffer and die, there's a tension there. So to find that answer in Islam, that was a really beautiful thing.
Okay, Nathan, can you give us a bit of your background? Your parents, where are your parents from, and also the denomination? What type of Christian were you? If you could talk about that, please.
I'm English.
Don't forget your parents are probably watching.
Yeah, they are. So I'm going to be, obviously, try and be accurate to my history, because my dad's a historian, so, he's I need to know my family history. I'm English, but like most English people, we are mixed with Scottish and Irish and Welsh. However, I don't really have any Welsh blood in me, but I do have Scottish and Irish. My dad we more stem from the Irish bloodline, so my surname is Gubbins, which is an Irish surname. But generally, if you ask me, I'm English. Well, if you actually ask me, I'm London. I don't really consider myself part of the kind of like the nationalist framework, but because London, we are our own people. But I was brought up a Protestant Christian. But in our church, because again, like London is so multicultural, we had various cultures, and there was a massive, significant portion of West Africans in our church, specifically Nigerians. So that, and I have a lot of close ties to the Nigerian community. My closest friend and one of my longest friends is Nigerian. So again, that kind of opened me to different worldviews at a very, very young age.
And Ali, I want to know your background. So Nathan was a Protestant. Were you Protestant as well?
I was, and so listening to your experience, there are many similarities, because these layers that we have to work through, cultural layers, even political layers, all these these presumptions, and a lot of, I'm sorry to say, ignorance about most Americans don't know the difference between Arabs and Muslims. And there are Sikhs being killed in the United States because they don't know the difference between Sikhs and Arabs and Muslims. So all these layers we have, it's a process of discovery. And I think the thing that's common between us, very interesting, is that we were driven to continue peeling back all those layers by our desire to know truth. And so for me, it became a decision between absolute faith in a religion that I was raised in, or embracing absolute truth. And
you come to a crossroad.
And I chose the latter. I believed that my decision was that Islam represented truth, and that if I continued to remain in the Christian church, it would be a desire to remain faithful, to have absolute faith regardless, almost like we say negatively, blind faith. So if you have all the facts, if you do your research, you come to a crossroads and you have to make a decision. Did you find yourself at that crossroads?
That's a good question, because I don't, I have heard other convert stories, and maybe like you, Ali, like there was that point. I think for me it was always something that I was very gradual about, and so I don't think there was ever a point where I was like, I need to kind of leave this and go to this. It was just more kind of like, okay, I've stopped really believing that Jesus is the Son of God, and now I've kind of stopped going to church, And then I started telling my parents, okay, I'm looking into Islam. So it was more gradual, and I think this is one of the biggest mistakes as reverts and converts can possibly do to their families, is this lack of communication, where if they don't communicate to their families and parents, what happens is that they normally come back one day and say, Mum, Dad, I'm Muslim. Well, like, when did that shift happen? And there should be this type of kind of communication to the parents, I feel anyway, that, or friends or just people, so they just know that you're not going in a direction that is kind of uncertain. But going back to the crossroads question, no, but I do remember things like it'll be interesting to know for you, Ali, but Malcolm X's autobiography was a massive point in my conversion. I mean, his book really, I think the amount of times I've heard this book really being influential in a convert's journey is a lot, and I found that to be, you know, a moment where, you know, at least not necessarily conversion to Islam, but at least kind of like maybe my old beliefs and stuff, it just doesn't work. Same with Malcolm, he had that tension, and he kind of left that.
How did you come in contact with that? Was it in the UK or?
It was by my Turkish friend. So she read the book and said it was amazing, and then gave it to me. And you know, I just remember reading it, and just I've given it to my brother. I've recommended it to my friends, and there's so many truths still now in that book, because you were mentioning that journey from blind faith to the religion of truth, and what he speaks, it really is very, you know, very profound, like I feel.
But many, I think most of us born in European and American countries, at least my parents were very understanding. You know, the whole philosophy is, you know, as long as you're happy.
Yes.
So the response was very favorable.
Yes.
It's not necessarily the same in those brothers and sisters who come into Islam from Christianity, from African countries or Asian countries. It can often be deadly.
Very good point. Very good point.
What about your family? Is that consistent with my experience?
Yes, that's very consistent. I mean, I'm very, very blessed to have the parents that I have, and you know, I can just, you know, I'm kind of speechless sometimes to how, you know, they reacted to my response. I do remember the first time I did actually mention Islam to you know, I told my parents that I was coming to Islam, and you know, I said, Dad, you know, I'm thinking about you know, look, I'm looking into Islam. The first thing he said to me was, how many wives do you want? I said, one, Dad, only one.
Sounds like he has a great sense of humor.
And then, you know, my brother's doing Allahu Akbar in the background. I'm like, okay. And then my mum, she's not really religious. I mean, it depends on the day when she's religious or not, but because she doesn't really see the difference, I just told her, and she said, oh, okay, as long as you're happy. So it kind of goes along with that kind of, that mentality. But at the end of the day, I love them, they love me, and from that is this kind of really this spirit that I feel resembles the civilizations of old. I'm thinking of Andalus, I'm thinking of Turkey, of Istanbul, where you see in our household we have a Christian, we have a Muslim, we have an agnostic, and hopefully my brother, inshallah, one day will be a Muslim. So you know, that loving attitude is definitely prominent in our household. So I can also understand that when I said the communication that converts have to their parents, I understand that that is also specific to me. And so people that come from African backgrounds or Asian backgrounds, they probably or may find that very difficult to do so, and that is a decision that they would have to make. So I understand that's also
and increasingly Latin American countries as well. That's where we see the largest growth, exponential growth in the Muslim world.
Wow.
Most Latin American families are Catholic, and oftentimes they can be they have challenges as well. But I have another question for you.
Of course.
You know, you've read history. Your father's a historian. we're in Egypt right now, and it doesn't take much to see the remains of Pharaoh's civilization. I don't know if it's mainstream or not, but I've read that the ancient Egyptians did travel to the UK, to what we now know as the UK. They were very competent in terms of seafaring. And so if the ancient Egyptians 3,000–4,000 years ago made it to the British Isles, and we know that Muslims were traveling great distances to perform Hajj, and were developing maps, developing the first compass systems, how early did Islam reach the British Isles?
This is, I think, you know, a very good question. Again, I don't want to talk out of hand because I'm not an academic in this field. For my studies, I had to look at this issue, and what I can remember is that the fact that Islam has had a relationship with Europe since its very beginning. Since its very beginning, specifically with the UK, I would say what's kind of known, again from my knowledge, which is limited, is the fact that there was an increase in relations in, I think, the 16th, 17th century. This was around the time of Queen Elizabeth I, I believe, and we see there were not masses, but there were prominent figures of Muslims within the kingdom of Queen Elizabeth, as well as on the ground, as merchants, as salesmen, as sailors, these type of jobs on the ground, and then also within the court, probably as advisors, as maybe just not servants as such, but maybe along in that field. So this is, I think, one of the most earliest contacts, and then I think.
Are you sorry to interrupt? Are you saying that most of those were coming from which part of the Muslim world?
I think this is more Spain, Morocco, North Africa. Again, I don't want to talk out of hand because there may be other Muslims there. Interestingly, I remember, I don't know how sound it is, but during this time there was a lot of wars between, there was a lot of sea wars between the British Empire, which was trying to expand, and also the neighbouring empires, which of course the closest neighbouring empire at that point was the Ottoman Empire. So there was a lot of tension and relations to that. Interestingly, you find that I remember hearing that because the Irish were being oppressed by the British, and this I think is slightly later with the Great Famine, the Ottoman Empire invited or sent ships for the Irish to come. And so there's a lot of Irish that moved from Ireland and went to the Ottoman Empire. So they went to Anatolia.
Okay.
So I remember asking my Turkish friend's mum, and you know, and she told me in the north of Turkey there's a lot of ginger people. So this may be kind of one reason there, because maybe the Irish came in and they settled and maybe they converted. Another story I remember, I'm not sure how sound it is, but characters like within the famous Pirates of the Caribbean movie, which is set around this time, 16th, 17th century. Characters like Barbosa. Barbosa is actually a real figure, and he's the villain in Pirates of the Caribbean, and he's a pirate, but he's apparently a Muslim from Morocco. So already there's that contact, and even what's more surprising is I forgot the name of Johnny Depp's character in Pirates of the Caribbean. Can anyone remember? I can't remember, but it's the main character, and he's actually a revert. Okay. So I mean, again, this is, I'm not sure how sound it is, but I remember seeing and reading this, and in continuation to what I've just mentioned, it wouldn't surprise me, because the British were very oppressive and in that time, so people may have escaped and tried to find other things.
Well, we did get very exciting news, archaeological news from Sweden, just outside of Stockholm last year, I believe it was, or maybe 2015, with the discovery of this ring in a grave, and it had inscribed on it, Allah.
Okay.
Okay, and it's dated to, the grave and the human remains are dated to the 8th century.
Wow.
Sweden.
Sweden, outside of Stockholm. So this established the connection between the Vikings and Muslims.
Yes, yeah.
And what is open to interpretation is who was traveling where. Were the Muslims traveling up to Sweden, or were the Swedes coming down? The Vikings were well known for their strong navy, seafaring abilities. So maybe someone came to the Arab world and brought back a ring as a gift, or. But in any case, the connection was established.
And I think that fits in perfectly as well with what you're saying about Andalus, Spain, because that's the same kind of time frame. So we're looking at Muslims entering into Spain and then spreading over into Sicily and working their way, like our French guest said, a kilometer away from Paris. So maybe that's probably one of the reasons how the ring got there as well.
Yeah, and also the point of the Ottoman Empire, when it opens its doors for the Irish people, it happened after the Andalusia have fallen to the Catholic Church. So what happened here is that the Jews were persecuted, and also the Muslims, of course. So the Ottoman Empire at the same time, at the east, now it was rising and emerging. So it opens its doors for the Jews. If you come to our land, if you want to do so. So it was like something, because they know that Muslims, they deal with what they call Ahl al-Kitab, the people of the book. They have like special treatment to them, like, and they give them the rights and so on and so forth.
Okay. One interesting thing though, when we go back to the UK, one of the first masajid that were built in the UK was built in Liverpool. In 1889 by Abdullah Quilliam. So, you know, he was a Scouser. So and then they say that the first masjid that was built in the capital, in London, as you know, Regent's Park Mosque, which was built in 1924.
1924.
So that's, I think, like from 1889 onwards was when Islam really became manifested in the UK.
I mean, I mean, similarly, I think we've seen it's starting to flourish, and obviously with, you know, people coming from different regions of the world, especially with the British Empire and South Asia and its control. I'm guessing there must have been a lot of relationships there. And I know obviously after the Windrush as well, you had more people in the 60s, 70s, 80s that come. And so now, right now, you know, we have very strong communities within the South Asian community, strong Turkish community, and strong Arab community in the UK. So there's just a very, well, this is in London anyway, a very refreshing kind of multicultural Islam.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, you mentioned that many of the first Muslims came from North Africa and so on and so forth. When Britain was also in its colonialized period, when it was in India, soon after World War II, there was a large influx of Pakistanis, Bengalis and Indians that came. And hence that's how my father got there, and I was born in the UK. But that's another reason to why one of the biggest numbers of Muslims in the UK is from Pakistan, or India or Bengal.
Are you? Is it
We're
time
going to go
shift?
to All right, so on that note, dear viewers, let's watch our report, and then when we come back, we'll continue talking with Brother Nathan and looking at Islam in the UK, and we'll have a look at Ramadan as well. How do British Muslims spend their Ramadan? And then we'll move forward and look at some of the problems that have been taking place in the UK. So we've all been seeing these on our social media and on the media as well, so we'll get some responses on that. So we'll see you all in a few moments.
In His name we die, here and there. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا.
The East London Mosque and London Muslim Centre is at its busiest during Ramadan. Let us look at some of the various activities that take place during the holy month.
رمضان قد أهل بالصيام وأطل.
Iftar is provided for over 500 people at the London Muslim Centre every day.
رمضان قد أهل بالصيام وأطل مسعدا أهلا وخلا ليته في كل حين. رمضان قد أهل رمضان قد أهل بالصيام وأطل مسعدا أهلا وخلا ليته في كل حين. رمضان قد أهل بالصيام وأطل مسعدا أهلا وخلا ليته في كل حين. رمضان قد أهل بالصيام وأطل.
Many worshippers come from all different parts of London to come and break their fast before going off to pray the Maghrib prayer. Our staff work throughout Ramadan to ensure worshippers can get a nice meal for iftar.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Over 250,000 people passed through the East London Mosque and London Muslim Centre last Ramadan. The demand for our services is increasing as our congregation gets bigger every year. The number of sisters attending Taraweeh has seen exponential growth as we struggle.
قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم.
And in His name we die.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, after watching that report about Islam and Ramadan in the UK. How tempting when you see such good food, and how amazing and how warm is it to see so many people come together in one congregation when you see that prayer of Eid. Brother Nathan, if we can continue talking, let's move forward now after the report, looking at Ramadan and how do you spend your Ramadan in the UK? Do you have any obstacles in practicing your faith in fasting, in praying, and so on and so forth?
This is a interesting question because since coming to Egypt, and obviously this is my first time practicing Ramadan in a Muslim majority country, it has kind of enlightened the benefits and the disadvantages of doing Ramadan in Egypt and in England as well.
Okay.
In England, I think one of the benefits is the fact that you are around people that are not fasting, so you're not around people that are grumpy, you're not around people that want to fight you and stuff like this, but at the same time you're around people that are not aware it's Ramadan, and that's disadvantageous in the sense that there's not that communal spirit. So when you're going to Taraweeh prayer on a Friday, Saturday night, you are passing, you know, people that are going out to parties. You are passing, you know, people that just have no regard for the state that you are in.
Okay.
And I think that can be difficult. In terms of, I mean, Egypt, it's just great to the fact that when, you know, I live on a busy road, very busy road, but then come iftar, it's silent, like a ghost town. And
That's what Ali was saying as well previously in one of our episodes.
it must be, I find it really beautiful. Like, I don't know about you, Ali, but I just find that silence and that tranquility just a sign that everyone is in it together in a way. And we miss that, I think, as Muslims in England, or converts maybe. I think my experience as well as a revert differs maybe from Muslims practicing Ramadan in England. Having a family that, you know, enables you to wake, I mean, all of you wake up for suhoor together, or you break your iftar together, maybe creates or strengthens the communal spirit. Obviously, as a convert, a revert, this is something that we don't necessarily have.
Okay.
Of course, I think it's tough at the beginning, but, you know, if this is just the challenge that Allah has placed into my life, and to revert's life. And I don't know, Ali, about you, if you feel the same way on this particular issue, in just terms of iftars and suhoors and that.
Well, my only experience as a Muslim is in Egypt. I actually arrived with, you know, filled with curiosity about Islam, but I wasn't a Muslim. Okay, and so I don't have much practice, any practice in the United States. So this is a question that I had watching the report there. Yes. That was a huge group of Muslims.
Yeah.
You're saying that it was a little less than 100,000.
That's right.
Where was that, and how common is it to see a group of Muslims like that?
Junaid, do you want to?
Well, I think that was in Birmingham. There's a common trend now, it's been over the last few years, where a lot of speakers, a lot of scholars are trying to encourage people to come out of the masajid and pray the Eid prayer outside, which is the sunnah of the Prophet, not to pray in the mosques, to come out and to show strength, to have one prayer for the whole community. So in Birmingham, which has been really amazing because there's a large Muslim population there, the mosques have somehow managed to agree, and people are starting to pray out in the open. And that particular image was from last year, where just over 80,000 people came together to make one prayer, which is absolutely amazing. And they're estimating again this year, in a few days' time, the same thing's going to occur.
Inshallah,
but hopefully there'll be bigger numbers.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
How does the government, the police, how do they respond to do they provide protection? Do they block roads? In New York City, for example, when large prayers are conducted, the New York Police Department will, you know, protect the Muslims and block roads. Is it the same thing in?
From what I've seen, I haven't really seen such a big police presence. But the Muslims themselves do have like a police force, if you can say. There is certain people wearing yellow jackets, and they are covering the entrances and exits, so it's controlled. But it's really nice to see such large amounts of Muslims come together.
So what if somebody asked the question and said, okay, where is the Islamophobia? Well, that you can do whatever you want now in your case, so maybe now we are exaggerating, Muslims are exaggerating, saying that they are attacked. So how would we respond to this? What do you think of it, Junaid?
I don't know,
and add to that the fact that you have your first ever Muslim mayor for London, and other members in the lower house of the parliament. Where is this Islamophobia?
So do you think it's exaggerated? Like,
no, I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's very much covered behind, under the rug. Of course, you know, unfortunately, in Ramadan alone, there has been about 3 massive events, I would say, that occurred. And recently, obviously, the terror attack outside Finsbury Mosque, Finsbury Park Mosque. The way, of course, we have a Muslim mayor in London, but I was just talking to a friend before coming on, and he was just reminding me that when we are in London, when we are in Birmingham, when we are in Manchester, we can easily be in this kind of cloud, in this bubble, that we see these multiculturals, that we forget that these other cities, major cities as well. My brother, you know, studies and has, you know, finishing his studies in Nottingham. This is, you know, another major city. I studied in Norwich, another major city, and you do find that tension there. You know, I remember hearing stories of sisters, you know, men coming up to sisters and ripping their hijabs off. Like this form of kind of terror does exist, and this is much more. There's no reports on this from the media, and this is another big obstacle in England and I think around the world.
So the attack you mentioned in Finsbury Park Mosque, the attacker himself, he drove from Wales.
Wow.
And he did the attack in London. So to show that we can claim that London is multicultural, but he came from Wales.
Yeah.
So
how far? What distance is it?
I mean, that's a long distance. It's not like, I mean, it could be something like going from Cairo to Aswan. Like it's not.
Oh wow.
Maybe it's not that long, but it's not like
more than 500 kilometers.
Probably about 300.
Okay.
Probably about 300. But I think the point is that Wales. I'm not sure about the whole of Wales. You can tell me, but there's parts of Wales which are very isolated, and I think those people probably have never seen a Muslim except for on TV.
Maybe, and I mean, but then it would be interesting to know where this Welshman was from, because if he's somewhere like Cardiff, where I mean, Cardiff, I'm sure is multicultural as well. It's the main city. So if he's from Cardiff, then what we're kind of saying, it doesn't even really matter, because and we find this in London as well. It doesn't really matter that there's still racisms within like London. I mean, it's very multicultural, but you know, you can have people still maintaining, like I said, like me for instance, I was example of this. Like you know, the way I viewed Islam and the way I viewed Muslims was very racialized.
Okay, Nathan, if you can just hold that thought. We've got our first phone call. We'll take this call, then we'll come back to you, inshallah. We have with us brother Abu Maryam calling us from Cairo. Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Junaid, happy and blessed Ramadan to you and all your colleagues in the studio.
Thank you very much. And you too as well. Go ahead, brother. Give us your question or your comment for the day.
Actually, I wanted to call from the beginning of the show. I didn't want to interrupt your amazing discussion. Actually, it was wonderful about the story of Islam, of the brother, and I like it so much.
Thank you very much. Do you want to ask him a question, or do you want to make a comment on the story?
Actually, the main and interesting thing is that the key to Islam was having a good character, or being in a good behavior, and you're dealing with non-Muslims, or so it is the key. So many stories of the reverts. The reason is dealing with a good character Muslim, who was dealing in a good way, behaving well, being a role model in his life. So this is the fantastic thing in the story. So if you and us and all the Muslims want to change the world, change your behaviors. That's all.
Okay, Abu Maryam, thank you very much for that beautiful phone call, and we hope you have a blessed Ramadan or what's left, and also have a good Eid if we don't speak to you again. Beautiful words there. I like what he said. If you want to change the world, change your character first.
I think, you know, it's a very powerful message, that, and I think it rings true. I mean, it really is, you know, your actions speak louder than words. You know, I mean, words count. I'm not going to diminish the fact that, you know, we should try and, you know, speak and not cower away from, you know, the beauty that Islam is through our words. But truly, people will judge us on our actions. So, you know, I remember, you know, how hospitable the Asian community was to me when I converted, and you know, that just really enhances your love for Islam, you know, and just, you know, people being accepting. And I mean, generally, of course, there's other problems, but character really is, you know, a major part.
Words do count.
Yes.
And this is important in terms of addressing your question about the perception of how can there be Islamophobia when you have all these Muslims praying together, you have politicians. Well, also two very important persons in British society, the government and the press.
Of course.
Their words and actions do demonstrate Islamophobia is a serious problem. When you have 2-year-old children with Arabic names who can't board flights because they're on a no-fly list, the system can't differentiate between toddlers and terrorists. Also, the press, the BBC in particular, has been has been challenged repeatedly for having a very biased perception and presentation of Muslims, of Islam, using inflammatory language that's very harmful to everyone. This is one of the two important persons that makes Islamophobia a reality.
And I think a clear example of that is when the terrorist attack took place on London Bridge. I think they said within 3 minutes, all the mainstream media put across all front pages, terrorist attack on London Bridge within 3 minutes. Then when this attack took place in Finsbury Park, it was within 2 hours, and all the mainstream media were saying incident, car accident for the good 2 hours, until there was pressure put on by the Muslim community. Then they were forced to say that it was a terrorist attack.
Let's assume that it is not conspiratorial, or it's nothing is intended. And let's think from their point of view, the British people. What do they think about Muslims in general when we say the word Muslim? Maybe there are roots for this. Let's take this side, play the devil. So maybe they have some rights. Is there like some violations of some Muslims doing certain things? Maybe they are afraid of, like in some parts of America, they were afraid like immigrants are taking our jobs and so on. So is there like some of these thoughts coming to their minds?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely that is very prevalent. From I mean, even from my experience, just even loved ones, this is very entrenched. Even me, I'm just reminding myself, of asking my friends and inquiring. I've had Muslim friends all my life. I mean, they've never, I wouldn't say they've been the closest, but I had them on my phone line. I could have called them up whenever I needed to. So, there was a degree of closeness. But even then, I remember asking, and really it fundamentally came down to kind of like, so why do you kind of beat your women? Or why do you, press your women? Or the stereotypes that it's still entrenched. Even, and this is what I was talking about, the racisms with most. I had many cultural friends. I had different cultures, but yet still deep inside. So now where's that coming from? And yes, the press,
maybe ignites the idea.
Yes, it's not
even started.
Sorry to be so direct, but as a white British revert, people are still asking you, why do you beat your wife?
No. Apologies, I may have misstated that. I meant when I was looking. When I eventually asked my friends, I had a bunch of friends that were part of that culture, but yet still it was deep entrenched in me. So when I was looking, fundamentally the question was, why do you beat your women? Why are you so oppressive? Why do you blow yourself up? Blah 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 blah. In terms of igniting, there's definitely that, but I would say going back to the Abu Maryam's point, in terms of character, I think it's the British people's character, and I'm speaking as a quote unquote English male from London, right? I find that because of our political history, we've been in power for so long, before America, but even America you can classify as the white man, quote unquote. Yes. It's very difficult for us to comprehend other ways of life. And if those other ways of life do exist, they have to be subservient to us, or they have to be the good immigrant, for instance. Or they have to kind of follow our lead. This is what I find, and that reflects in our attitudes and our mannerisms as well. Like, so being from London, I was exposed to other cultures, but because of these other cities, now I'm not saying everyone, there's good people in everywhere, but generally I think that reflection of the political state has had an impact on our peoples, where they would easily alienate our brothers and sisters of humanity within their city, easily, with no hesitation, rather than kind of welcoming them in that we have seen from other cultures.
Nathan, Junaid, do you believe that this mindset that you're describing for us, Nathan, if it were overcome, would we see more shahadas from Britons?
I think 1,000%. I think, and you know, this is a beautiful thing that I think we are seeing, that Allah has planned, that because of the media is inflaming these things, people are recognizing, wait, this is not the case. Let's look at this for us. And so what we are now seeing is that Islam is it's becoming, like you said, the second largest religion in the UK. And not just that, we are now starting to see a formulation of Islam in the articulation of British cultural values. What that means is still, you know, to be defined, but it does mean that, you know, we have the Asian contingent, the Turkish, the Arab, but you are all now finding that the African Caribbean community, which has had a large presence of Muslims, especially in South London, you know, articulating their Islam in a particular way. Of course, not rejecting the other contingents that I mentioned, but now starting to establish their Muslimness, if I can use that word. And again, we are seeing that with the white kind of British contingent as well. So the more we see of this, the more we kind of define and redefine our character as well, I think we are going to see, you know, inshallah, increase.
Okay, excellent, wise words there. And I want to just answer the question as well very quickly, is the fact that I feel the answer is within the words of Malcolm X, which we mentioned before. It's his answer, and he said that Islam is the solution for America's racism. So I think once again that would definitely increase the shahadas. We are come to the end of the program. I want one word answers, if I can, going around the table as I always do. Omar, what one word answer would you say that you know, the Arab world, what could the Arab world do in response to these kind of scenarios when they see attacks, and so what can they do?
Well, we shouldn't fall into the same mistake of generalizing, because we shouldn't put everyone in the same basket. And we think about like that because a British man coming from this origin did something maybe horrible, that doesn't mean that everyone agrees with this. As we have said like so much about this in America, what happened, and when Trump like had the ban and so on, so many Americans were against us.
Okay.
So we shouldn't just generalize, because we are going to just raise the animosity more and more, and we shouldn't do that.
Excellent. Brother Ali, what's your thoughts and process on what you've heard with regards to racism in the UK and racism in the States? What one sentence could you say with regards to Muslims and racism?
Well, I believe Malcolm X had it right. Islam does have the answer, because there's no room for bigotry of any kind, racial, gender, or whatever, in Islam. Islam respects cultures. It appreciates Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating diversity among humankind, and it wants that to be intact.
Excellent. All right, great. Nathan, you have the last word, and I know your mother and father are watching as well. Do you have a message for them and how they can hopefully, inshallah, embrace Islam as well?
You know, inshallah, I think, you know, I love them, they love me. I have to reiterate that all the time. And, you know, whenever they're ready to ask me anything, I'm there. And inshallah, we'll continue this discussion on the kitchen table, Mum and Dad.
You never know, your dad might be sitting here in a few times. All right, on that note, I'd like to thank all of you for coming to the studio. Nathan, thank you very much, and collectively say assalamu alaikum. So, dear viewers, we've come to the end of our program here. We looked at Nathan's story and how he came to Islam. We also looked at the UK and how Muslims participate in Ramadan and also other activities there. We must always remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that all the believers are brothers, irrespective of skin color, irrespective of language, background, social status. We are all under one umbrella, and our leader is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I encourage all those who are looking into Islam, just try it. Pick up the Quran and read it. It is not going to hurt you. You are only going to get closer to your Creator, and you will find, if you are sincere and reading the Quran, just like Brother Ali and just like Brother Nathan, that you will come to a point where you will accept that there is a Creator, and you will accept the point that we will have to stand in front of Allah and give account for our life in this world. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully I would like to see you in our next episode. So until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Name of Allah, we are born, in His name we live, and in His name we die. Here and there, our souls prostrate to their Creator with humbleness and piety, and creatures do zikr all the time, here and there. Humans circumambulate the Kaaba while migrating birds stretch forth their wings, finding their way by Allah's mercy, here and there. Our Prophet advised us to travel, seeking knowledge, while exploring Allah's miraculous creations here and there. La 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 la.